Okay, I don't want to steal any time from my brother John. So John's, from the San Francisco Peninsula Ecclesia, and his topic for the week is Leading Ladies. And today's class title is Mother in Israel, Deborah's Story, and Serpent Slayer, Jael's Story. Without further ado, Brother John.
Good morning, my brothers and sisters and friends. It's good to see you once again. So we're continuing with our theme on leading ladies. We did 2 yesterday. That's why you haven't missed a day. You haven't slept through a whole day. We're on number 3, even though it's day 2. And we looked at the picture Bible last night. I'm going to leave this up here for the rest of the week. So if you just want to have a look at it, it'll be right here for you. And today we're going to look at 2 leading ladies whose stories are very much intertwined because they're associated with the same battle. The first of these is Deborah, whose story is well defined by the title Mother in Israel, a phrase which is borrowed by a lot of Christian communities and is used very liberally. But I think perhaps should be used a little less liberally because it actually defines some incredible qualities which are not that common. Let's introduce ourselves to Deborah then. Deborah is a prophetess, the wife of Lapidot. And we can stop right there and say, actually, there's a different way to translate that, and that might be more meaningful. The word wife, you see, in English there, has both wife and husband, 2 English words, have extraordinary origins. You can explore them at your leisure, but they basically don't exist in any other language in that form. Hebrew, as many languages, just uses man and woman. So if you're someone's wife, I am that man's woman. If you're someone's husband, I am that woman's man. It's a simple possessive which doesn't have any special word associated with it. So Deborah, it says in Hebrew, a prophetess, the woman of Lapidot. Well, fair enough, it's the same thing, isn't it? And it may well be. Lapidot translates as burning torch or firebrand. One of the places you'll have seen that word before is when Gideon charges down the hill with his 300 men to attack whatever enemy it was, the Midianites, I think, and he smashes the jugs and out come these burning firebrands. Those are the Lapidot. So, what is that verse telling us? Deborah is a prophetess. The translation may be as it appears. Deborah, a prophetess, is the wife of a man named Firebrand. It's possible. Or, equally possible, Deborah, a prophetess, is a firebrand woman. And that, I suggest to you, is more likely. It isn't going to matter deeply one way or the other, but the way we see Deborah later, we see no husband, we meet no husband. She clearly lives a very autonomous lifestyle. Not that I don't have an agenda to prove that. And she's clearly a woman of substance. I mean that in terms of character. She is a natural leader. She is a firebrand. She is unafraid to even go physically to the battlefield against the Canaanites. So I suggest to you, this may be what we're actually being told. Deborah was a firebrand prophetess. Deborah, prophetess, was judging Israel at that time. So she was God's appointed judge. Now, why God had chosen a female judge at that time, we're never told. But he had, and that was her work. She held court under the palm of Deborah. There's a little hint there. Why is that not the palm of Lapidot, if indeed there's a husband called Lapidot? He would be the owner of the property. Again, there's a hint that that's not what's being said. She held court under the palm of Deborah in the hill country of Ephraim, which is actually on the tribal border, on the very south of Ephraim, just on the border with Benjamin. And Barak is God's appointed military leader because the Canaanites have invaded from the north, and God has commanded an army to go and repel them. He's commanded that 10,000 men go from the tribe of Zebulun and 10,000 men go from the tribe of Naphtali under the leadership of Barak. And Deborah brings the word of the Lord to him. Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go, gather your men at Mount Tabor, bringing 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun? And the problem is that Barak balks. Barak suffers from a brief attack of cowardice. He needs his hand held. Barak says to Deborah, well, if you go with me, I'll go, but if you don't go with me, then I won't go either. And this does not impress the Lord God, and through Deborah, God speaks to Barak and says, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory. For the Lord will now sell Sisera, and General Sisera is the commander of the armed forces of the Canaanites. I will now sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So straight away we're in this context of leading ladies. Is this therefore why Deborah led? Because Barak failed to. Is this why Deborah was a leader in Israel? And I've heard it said in our community with sort of hand-waving, fudging arguments, well, the only reason that Deborah led was because Barak kind of wasn't really up to the job. The man wasn't up to the job, and therefore a woman was allowed to lead. The answer to this question is no, unequivocally. How do we know that? We know that because Deborah was leading Israel, Deborah was judging Israel before Barak showed any cowardice about anything. Deborah was already in charge. And the idea that a woman would be elevated because of Barak's failure is true enough, but that's not talking about Deborah. If we think clearly, we know that's talking about Jael. So fair play. If Barak had stepped up as he should have done, maybe Jael would not have been elevated, but Deborah was elevated already. So don't allow the confusion to creep in that the only reason Deborah led was the inadequacy of Barak. The only reason Jael was elevated was the inadequacy of Barak. Deborah was a chosen leader of God in any event. Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. It's probably worth pointing out where they're standing. Deborah has gone to Mount Tabor with the Israelite army, with the 10,000 from Naphtali and Zebulun. Actually, others joined in as well. And Deborah is the one who actually calls the start of the battle. In fairness, God does, but Barak is waiting for the command from Deborah before he will charge. Deborah said to Barak, up, this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you? So at that point, Barak went down from the top of Mount Tabor with the 10,000 men following him. And the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, an extraordinary army for that time, and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away from the battlefield on foot. And of course, his destiny was to be killed by our leading lady Jael, that we'll come to in a minute. Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple. And it went down into the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. And you might ask yourself, why are we given the actual gruesome details of the destruction of Sisera? Is it just so that we can have some magnificent material for Sunday school plays that the kids are really going to enjoy and get into, and the boys are going to get all jealous because it's the girl who actually gets to do the gruesome deed? Could be, I doubt it. For some reason, we need to know the manner in which he died. That's going to be important because the Bible gives us nothing for no reason. Everything has a spiritual reason, and we're given so much detail in the manner of his death. This, then, is Deborah's victory song after the battle. Like Miriam writes a song of victory after the Egyptian horde destruction, so Deborah has written a song. From Ephraim, their route, they marched down into the valley. Following you, Benjamin, with your kinsmen. From Machir marched down the commanders, and from Zebulun, those who bear the lieutenant's staff. The princes of Issachar came with Deborah, and Issachar, faithful to Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Zebulun is a people who risked their lives to the death. Naphtali too, on the heights of the field. Okay, now one thing you might notice is that there's more tribes named there than you might expect. God had commanded 10,000 men from Zebulun, this tribe, and from Naphtali. And yet, we can see 3 other tribes are involved, which is very encouraging. We see Issachar is there, Ephraim is there, and Benjamin is there. Why are these tribes involved and no others? And I'm not sure there's a huge amount of spiritual wealth in figuring it out, but for the sake of I enjoy solving puzzles and I enjoy solving crosswords and things like that, we can probably figure out why it's the tribes that are involved. Here's a map which is tremendously familiar to you, I hope. Let's just orient ourselves. Here's the Palm of Deborah in the hill country of Ephraim on the border between these two states, these two tribal lands. Here's Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor is on this kind of triplet point boundary between these 3 tribal lands. So this is a high point, and the land falls away, of course, to the coast. You won't be able to see it, but there's a tiny little blue squiggle here running down from Tabor. Basically along this boundary and out to the Mediterranean Sea is the river Kishon. That's where the battle ended and the Canaanites were routed. That's where Sisera will have jumped out of his chariot. And as we'll see, he had a plan B. He was a good commander in that respect because he had a plan to escape to the northeast. And he makes it all the way to the northeast where he actually has people who are sympathetic to him and traitorous to Israel, and he meets them in this place. But that's also where Jael is, and that's where he meets his end. So that orients us. Now remember, God gave the command. The battle is supposed to start here, Mount Tabor, right? And God says, take 10,000 men from Zebulun and Naphtali. Okay, so now we understand why it's those 2 tribes, because they border the place where God wants the battle to start. So that just logistical sense. And we can also see the other tribes that join. The first tribe that joins them, faithfully, is Issachar. Why Issachar? Well, that makes obvious sense, doesn't it? Because the mountain is actually on the border of 3 tribal lands. So the people of Issachar are actually going to physically see the men of Zebulun and Naphtali faithfully assembling on the mountain slopes here as Sisera's army is pushing in from the west. So it makes sense to me that they'll see their brothers assembling and faithfully go and join them. And the other 2 tribes who got involved, and this is partly beautiful and partly poignant, are Ephraim and Benjamin. And you say, well, why those 2? And the answer's staring you in the face, isn't it? Because this is where Deborah judged Israel, right there, on the border of these 2 tribes. So these 2 tribes said, hey, don't leave us out. That's our woman. That's our prophetess. That's our judge. We will go and fight with her. So the people of Ephraim and Benjamin likewise went up to the battle. The sad part is the length scale. This was Israel's judge. All Israel should have cared. All Israel did not care. The idea of the possessive love of this is our leader only spread as far as the 2 tribes whose site she bordered. So as a consequence, in the victory song, which is Judges chapter 5, again, for those who like to have the chapters in front of you, Judges chapter 5, 4 and 5 is where we are, there is rebuke for those who did not show up to the battle. Even though God only explicitly commanded the attendance of 2 of the tribes, it has always been God's intention that they should operate as brothers together. And here already exhortation is beginning to creep in. Yeah? You might say, oh yeah, I heard about that disaster. That belongs to that ecclesia over there. Wow, what a mess. Don't have to worry about that. God expects us to be a family together across all of Israel. God commanded 2 tribes to attend. I truly believe he always expected 12 tribes to attend. And Deborah rebukes them in her inspired song. Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds to hear the whistling for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben there were great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan. And Dan, why did he stay with the ships? Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, staying by his landings. The torrent Kishon swept the enemy away, the ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. March on, my soul, with might. So we've looked at the faithful tribes who fought for Israel. Let's look now at those who were rebuked at being absent from the war. And the first one rebuked is Reuben. Well, why would you rebuke Reuben all down here? Well, they're all supposed to join in, but perhaps the reason Reuben is the first one rebuked, who can suggest to me a reason? You're whispering things I can't hear. Maybe that's deliberate. It's like we'll mess him around. Firstborn. Who said firstborn? Excellent. I think that's the reason, isn't it? Reuben's the firstborn. He's supposed to take charge. We know he was unstable, weak as water. He was not a good firstborn. But he should have been a leader. He should have taken a leader's role. You know how, in most of, it's extraordinary when you see, even in modern families, the firstborn all too often, not always, but all too often, is the most mature, bears the most responsibility. Those of you who can look at me, for example, think about it, the extra maturity you bear, the extra responsibility that comes upon you. Huh? And for those of you who truly know me, you know I'm the middle child. Yeah? We just mess about and have fun. I'm not a firstborn. But Reuben was, and he's rebuked for that. Who else is rebuked? Gilead, or Gad, from being, again, the next nearest neighbor to where Tabor happens, and they couldn't be bothered to cross the Jordan and come over. Who else was rebuked? Dan, in both these territories? Well, Dan is the northernmost, so he would have been the first affected by the invasion of the Canaanites from where they'd been displaced. And finally, Asher, and that makes very good sense, doesn't it? Because the battle went from Tabor all the way down through the tribe of Zebulun's land and against the Kishon. The battle finished in Asher's front room, so to speak, and yet they couldn't be bothered to show up and help the enemy. So we see why the tribes are chosen for that rebuke. The song itself is very female forward. It's very unusual in military songs in the Bible and outside. All I mean by that is, I'm not going to go through all the tiny details, but in the pink color are the female characters and in blue are the male characters. Sorry for that rather sort of crass stereotype, but we end up having 8 female characters named and 7 male characters in a victory song of war. That's extremely unusual. That's all I'm pointing out. So there's a very heavy presence of the female influence under the leading lady Deborah, who led them essentially in this battle. There's more female names than male names. And additionally, female characters take the lead in the plot line of the song as it's written, of Judges chapter 5. Even the date, it's the days of Shamgar, a male prophet. And they're equated to, well, the days of Shamgar, they are the days of Jael. Jael has this elevation which God had permitted and God had essentially commanded. In those days, Deborah arose. She arose as a mother in Israel. These are phrases you're probably familiar with from the song. So again, notice the female focus here. Awake, awake, Deborah, sings the song. Later, awake, awake, Barak. But Deborah first, before Barak. The princes came with Deborah, and later the princes came with Barak. But again, Deborah takes the lead over Barak. Jael is the most blessed of women. That's a famous phrase that you should know from all sorts of contexts, and we'll look at that in just a minute. Jael is the most blessed of women is one of the centerpiece aspects of the song. And even Jael crushed Sisera's head, that's right, and the mother of Sisera is wailing, not the father of Sisera, not the brother of Sisera. It's all female-oriented for some reason. The mother of Sisera is wailing, and the news comes to the mother of Sisera, not from the princes, but from the princesses. So it's the princesses who bring the news of the death of Sisera to Sisera's mother. So you can see quite a lot of female emphasis in the plot line of the song that Deborah, under the inspiration of the Spirit, has constructed. And what we see is the contrast of two mothers. And this is why it ends up being a focus on the mother in Israel. You have this mother in Israel. Village life ceased, sings Deborah. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose. Arose a mother in Israel. And by contrast, you have the picture of the mother of Sisera. And she's looking through a window, standing at the lattice. What picture does that give you? What other woman was looking through a window, standing at a lattice? Anyone? Jezebel. That's right. So you just get that little hint. Now, the story of Jezebel is yet to come, but, with the timelessness the Spirit allows, it's the same motif. The mother of Sisera is pictured looking through the window, cried out through the lattice, "Why is my son's chariot so long in coming?" Yes, before she knows the dreadful news. Yes, she answered herself. They're so long in coming because they're spending so much time finding and dividing the spoils of the war that they've won. To every man a girl or two. A dreadful call. In fact, the word for girl here is actually the word womb. So that's what she intends. Let every soldier find a woman or two and deflower her and despoil her. That's the call of a woman, of the mother of Sisera. And so on the simple level, what we're shown in contrast is this song. The mother in Israel is a woman of God. Her children, her soldiers, they prevail, they live. The mother in Canaan belongs to an ungodly society that might call, to every soldier, may they find a girl or two. Her children are destroyed. To every man a girl or two. That's interesting. Do you think God heard that insult? I think he might have done. He says, "Oh, is that what you want? Is that what you want, mother of Sisera? I tell you what, I'll find a couple of girls for your boy." Sisera did indeed meet two girls. Deborah, who outmaneuvered him in battle, and Jael, who walloped a tent peg through his skull and stapled him to the planet. So, be careful what you wish for. He certainly met a girl or two, and I bet he wished he hadn't. So here then we see the wonderful contrast of fortunes of those, the godly and the ungodly. And with that, we'll segue very smoothly into Jael's story, which we've called Serpent Slayer, for a reason that's going to become quite striking, I hope. Jael is the wife of Heber the Kenite. Now, hang on a minute. We've learned about this before, haven't we? Because the Kenites are traitors to Israel. They have made a pact with Jabin, the king of Hazor, up in Syria, and this is Sisera's backup plan. If things go pear-shaped on the battlefield, and they shouldn't, because I've got 900 iron chariots, but if they do, and if this God of Israel really is something, this is my way out. It's via the Kenites. And Jael appears to be the wife of Heber the Kenite, but we've learned to explore this kind of phrase before, haven't we? Because the Hebrews don't have a word for wife. She is a woman of Heber the Kenite, okay, but Heber just means group. So this translation could be, as it appears, Jael is the wife of a Kenite man named Group, which would be a very unusual name, or it's just saying Jael is a woman of the Kenite group, right? That's who she lives with. She lives among the traitors. Is she herself a traitor? Clearly not, from the plotline that we see. In fact, her own name, and I'm convinced that the names we meet in Scripture are the names God gives them for us to learn from, nothing to do with what their parents called them. Jael, if it's a single syllable, Jael, it's mountain goat. But if it's two syllables, as I suspect, Yah-el, you can all translate that, Yah is God. And that would mean, if our exposition is correct, Jael is this. She is the one whose God was Yah, and in fact the only one whose God was Yah, because she was living amongst the Kenite traitors, who were ready to assist Sisera and his army in any way that they could. The one whose God was Yah, living amongst traitors. What a difficult way to live. What a difficult life she has right from the start. She is truly our leading lady. Jael's story, seize the day. Jael came out to meet Sisera. Turn aside, my lord, turn aside. Stop. You should have noticed something extraordinary already. Jael came out to meet Sisera. What an unassuming phrase. How easy to just not even have a brain react to that. Jael had no idea Sisera was coming. Sisera's supposed to be on the battlefield. Jael is living her life tens of miles away, doing her thing. And suddenly, the commander of the armed forces of the enemy of Israel, whom she would have known because he fraternized with the Kenites, they were the traitors, she'd recognize him, is walking into her camp. How long is it going to be before Sisera meets one of the other Kenites and is immediately taken into safety and spirited safely out of Israel? She has seconds to respond. And we don't notice this because the Bible gives us in such calm language. She would have been shocked, but guess what? Just like Rahab, who didn't know until she heard the banging of the soldiers on the door, she was ready. She was just going about her daily life, and suddenly there's Sisera. She has seconds to act, and she acts. She's ready. Turn aside, my Lord. Turn aside to me. Have no fear. Come into my tent. Let me get you out of sight of everyone else, because I'm living amongst traitors, but I stand for Yahweh. So Sisera turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. He said to her, please give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty. So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. Why did she give him milk when he asked for water? Any ideas? To make him sleepy. And this is valid. This isn't an old wives' tale. This is scientifically published within the last sort of 10 or 15 years. It's a L-form protein. It's called tryptophan, and it's a mild sedative. And to a man who's exhausted, who's run very many miles to escape a battlefield, yeah, to have this tryptophan in his system would certainly calm him. And for a man who's exhausted, you're guaranteed a mini coma, really. It's a very good idea. So she opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him. But Jael took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand and went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple, and he died. And we've commented before, that's an extraordinary amount of detail. He could have just said, and Jael killed him while he slept. But for some reason, we need to know the manner of that death. Let's look at the elevation of Jael within the song. And I'm sorry to have to tell you, but I can only go so long as a nerd without doing something like this. So here's a pie chart for you. That just makes me feel a lot calmer, a little bit of tryptophan for me, really. And what this is a breakdown of the words of Deborah's song and whom they praise. The praise of God is the proportion shown in white. The praise of Deborah, and Deborah's writing a song to praise herself, but under the inspiration of the Spirit, this is legitimate, is shown in dark green. And this largest section of all, in the light green, this is the praise of Jael. And this is what God was talking about. I will elevate this woman. She will be elevated in this song. Praise of Barak is this small gold period here, and praise of the Israelite warriors is this blue part. And as we've seen, there's also a part of the song which is dedicated to cursing the Israelite cowards who never showed up for the battle place in the meantime. So that's the breakdown. That's the song at a glance by proportion of words. And we're not going to go into this in great detail. Just a few takeaway facts. 60% of the song praises God and the leading ladies, Jael and Deborah. That's how female forward this song is. 25% of the song, the blue and the gold, praises the male warriors who fought for their God, and 15% curses the cowardly men who didn't even show up. Most blessed of women be Jael. Most blessed among women. Where have you heard that phrase before? Mary. Yeah, anyone who has any form of Catholic friends or Catholic background to themselves will know this. This is chanted in the Rosary. You know, blessed art thou among women. That's the blessing that is thought to be Mary's, and it is Mary's. Fair enough. It does say, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb." But what I want to point out is, before that was Mary's blessing, it was Jael's. So when you hear that blessing again, try and reset your mind. Oh yeah, that's Jael's blessing, that later also went to Mary, the mother of Jesus. But firstly, it was Jael's. The reason it's thought to be Mary's is because everyone's more familiar with the New Testament than the Old. That's not a good reason to think anything. And it's a very, again, look at how the women are elevated here. Not only is this blessing given to two women, Jael and Mary, but it is actually given by a woman in each case. D is Deborah. Deborah, the woman, under the inspiration of the Spirit, praises Jael, the woman. And in the later case, E, it's Elizabeth, her cousin, under the inspiration of the Spirit, who speaks these words. So the blessing is given by a woman to a woman in each case. And that just gives us a nice, the most blessed among women blessing was Jael's blessing before it was Mary's. It gives us a nice link. It says there's some sort of link now between Jael and Mary. Mary, of course, this particular Mary, is the mother of Messiah, the mother of Christ. So that means at some level there's a little link now between Jael and the mother of Messiah, the motherhood motif, via the fact that she's linked to Mary with this same blessing. And the other person who is sort of known to be the mother of Jesus, or the mother of the seed who will save us, is of course dates all the way back to the Garden of Eden, which is Eve. And so with that construct, there's now an implied link somehow between Jael and Eve. And that link is going to give us something really rather special. Let's look back at the very well-known text of the Garden of Eden. God said to the serpent, "You are cursed. He shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel." I won't exposit that. It's words you know very well, and the meaning you know very well. The meaning is Messiah will crush the head of the enemy of God's people. That's his purpose, right? And all the way in the Bible we see little precursors of Messiah, people who are types of Christ, who stand up and do a small amount of his work in cameo precursor. So don't miss Jael. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head. And it's not just one man. Sisera was the commander of the armed forces. So in that sense, he represented the whole of the Canaanite host, just as Messiah will crush the enemy, which is sin, which affects every man. So what Jesus will do will be 1,000 times bigger than what anyone else can do, of course. But in little precursor, the enemy of God's people, led by Sisera, was crushed, had his head crushed by the actions of the one who is linked to the mother of Messiah. In that sense, Jael takes that mothering role and crushes the head of the serpent. Jael is a cameo precursor of Jesus Christ himself, as some other men and women in the Bible are. So don't miss out her wonderful contribution to this theme. She indeed is the serpent slayer in that sense. And Jael is described in a very motherly way towards Sisera, just from the language of the song. She gave him blankets, she put him to bed, she brought him milk and curds. The narrative doesn't say anything about curds, so there's some sort of artistic license here. And she stands guard at the door of the tent when Sisera lies down, as a parent might. And this is the verse from the song. Between her feet Sisera sank, he fell, he lay still. Between her feet he sank, he fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. Sinks, falls, sinks, falls, sinks, falls. 3 times it wants to get our attention to that dynamic. Now here's the problem, and I realize it's a song, that's not what happened. Physically, right? Physically, he's lying prone. He is fast asleep. He is spark out when she kills him. But the song wants to say, no. He fell, he fell, he fell. He sank and fell from between her feet, or rather between her knees, is what the Hebrew says. That phrase is associated with childbirth. You'll find the same clause here in Genesis 30. So not only is Jael motherly towards Sisera, at some level, the Bible in its spiritual inspiration is trying to show, at some level, Jael is birthing Sisera. And dead. And what I think this is talking about is the afterlife, the resurrection, if you will, the second death. What this verse is singing about is the fact Sisera hasn't just died in this life, but because he's died representing the enemy of God, representing the serpent, he is dead forever. He is not only dead in this life, he is dead in the next life. Through the actions of Jael, she's guaranteed that his rebirth will also be a rebirth to death. I think it's a very beautiful spiritual message that's contained in that. It's kind of hard to explain, so I take a little longer in the book to sort of talk through that. Sisera is dead in this world and the world to come. In other words, there are two contrasts of mothers in the song. In this life, there's the contrast between the mother in Canaan and the mother in Israel, Sisera's mother and Deborah. The ungodly society, the children are destroyed. The women of God, the children prevail and live. But there's also the additional contrast of mothers in the afterlife, where Jael steps in as the second mother. The mother of Sisera births Sisera in his mortal life, and Sisera is killed in battle. But then the song describes Jael rebirthing Sisera in his second in the afterlife, and he still shows up dead. So he is not only dead in this life, compare Sisera's mother to Deborah, he is dead in the life to come, compare Sisera's mother to Jael. It's a very carefully constructed song. I invite your consideration of it at length. We see also a little hint of another serpent slayer was David, because Goliath represented his whole nation, the Philistines, didn't he? Because he said so. Goliath said, "Choose a man and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, my whole nation, will serve your whole nation. But if I win the duel, your whole nation will serve my whole nation." So Goliath said, "I'm not just here as a man. I'm here to represent an entire nation which is at enmity with God's people." And David kills this serpent with a single head wound strike. That's why we're told the importance of how David killed Goliath. Words you know well. One blow to the head, and the serpent was dead. So Jael stands alongside David. David gave a precursor cameo of the life of Christ in this aspect, and a couple of others. And Jael also stands alongside David in achieving this same thing. Let's slide back into Deborah's story, because the stories of Deborah and Jael are very difficult to pull apart. So we're going to finish with Deborah's story. Deborah, remember, chose to describe herself as a mother in Israel. This, in a way, is a little bit of a strange choice, because it seems like she had, I speak as a fool, better options. Deborah was a wise, discerning judge. She judged Israel from under the palm of Deborah. So why would you not choose your legacy in song? Why wouldn't you want to choose yourself to be remembered always as a wise judge? She said it's an option. I don't take that option. Deborah really was a mighty, valiant warrior. Whether she actually engaged in conflict, I don't know, possibly not. But she was there on Mount Tabor at the front lines, staring the Canaanite warriors in their iron chariots in the face. She was there. So she could choose her legacy as a mighty warrior. It's an option. She says, no, I don't want that one. I will describe myself as a mother in Israel. Why? And maybe I'm being naive to say that a mother is less than a judge or a mother is less than a warrior. At some level, those of you who are mothers will have to know you have to be a wise judge and a valiant warrior. So don't say, they might say to me, you think a mother's role is less than a judge and a warrior? You haven't met my 2-year-old. And I get what you're saying. Okay? So at some level. But at this level, she was a judge of God's whole people. She was on the physical battlefield. It seems these were higher roles, and it seems she's chosen a lesser role. But she also knows God's own leadership style is a nurturing one. So to choose to be remembered as a mother is an excellent choice. But there's one far better reason even than that. Here's what I think she did. Here's what I think she saw, or rather, here's who I think she saw. You judge according to the flesh, says Jesus of Nazareth. I judge no one. I am not here to choose the role of a judge. Am I a judge, says Jesus? No. Or one might qualify, not yet, because he will be a judge. God has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he has given assurance unto all men, in that he has raised him from the dead. That is Jesus, of course. But Jesus says, no, I don't choose the role of judge. Does he choose the role of warrior? Why not? He has 12 legions of angels at his disposal. Lord, shall we strike with the sword, said the apostles, and one of them, Peter of course, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. And Jesus said, no more of this, and touched the ear of the servant and healed him. No, I won't be here as a warrior, says Jesus, or at least not yet. I shall be a warrior on my second coming. I shall strike the earth with the rod of my mouth and with the breath of my lips. I shall slay the wicked in the time to come. He's a judge to come. He's a warrior to come. But in his first coming, which still hadn't happened at the time of Deborah, I believe Deborah saw that Messiah was not going to be a judge, that Messiah was not going to be a warrior. What role did Messiah choose? And the answer, brilliantly, it's so well timed, it was in the readings for yesterday. So we sat here and we had it read out yesterday evening. Look. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, Matthew 23, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. In a rare departure, Jesus speaks of himself entirely in the feminine gender. It's a hen. There's no such thing as a male hen. They're roosters, they're cockerels. Yeah? He says, I'm a hen with chicks in Jerusalem. A hen with chicks is a mother. Jerusalem is in Israel. That's pretty easy, right? Jesus says, here is my role. I have come to be a mother in Israel. Not a strutting rooster, not a crowing cockerel. I choose the role of mother in Israel. This is future to the time of Deborah, and I believe she saw that. We know from the scriptures, Jesus says, Abraham saw my day and was glad. So did Deborah. We can see it from the evidence. Jesus declined to be a judge. Jesus declined to be a warrior. Jesus chose his role as mother in Israel. Deborah was a literal judge, but did not memorialize herself that way. Deborah was a literal warrior and did not memorialize herself that way. She chose her role to be described in legacy as a leading lady, as a mother in Israel. Why? Because she saw Messiah's day and she was glad.
Oh, fantastic stuff, John. Thank you very much. It's now 9:44. If we could just be in our seats a little bit before 10.